1958. London. Falling in love was mythic. Over-exaggerated, romanticized, far-fetched, idealistic. Falling in love was anything but realistic. It was fairy tales he read and simplified, shortened stories he heard as a child. It was the glass wall everyone puts up in front of their everlasting relationship to make it perfect. Falling in love was anything but perfect. At least to Jeongguk, anyway. He'd grown up around a family falling apart like crumbles of a cheaply painted wall. His mother despised her husband, who loathed his wife. They'd been together for years and years, yet unhappy, unsatisfied, unperfect. Why were they still together? Jeongguk would never know, for he'd never ask. He just understood simply. Love never lasts. Oh, he's quiet, Jeongguk heard. Doesn't talk much, reads a lot. He's at work a lot, rarely ever at home. Jeongguk scoffed to himself, standing by the doorway. What was so reprehensible about being quiet? He's heard it since he was a child. You talk too little, open your mouth a bit more, stop being such a bore. Plus, reading is the one escape he has from everything that surrounds him. And his work keeps him busy. He just wants to be kept busy, from everything around him. His own self, perhaps. I think it's rather charming, really. Never curses, always polite. Plus, he's so intelligent from all those books he reads. Works at a law firm. The one by the downtown, yeah. Jeongguk heard further, and that made his shoulders relax a little. So he's not the worst. Jeongguk was stood by the entrance of the house he was in. Whose house? He's unsure. In fact, for the past few weeks, Jeongguk had been rather unsure. Moved to London a month ago. Barely settled into a new home, and now he'd been dragged into their neighbor's house. Loud chatter came from the living room, while Jeongguk looked around, taking in the modern aesthetic of the home. It was rather large, which made Jeongguk wonder about the number of people residing there. The rain was pouring heavily outside. London, of course. It was nighttime, around 8 p.m. Jeongguk saw a vinyl sitting on a little brown end table pressed against the corner of the wall, jutting out with its wooden refinery. Jeongguk placed his fingertips gently against the onyx disc, sitting silently on the spinner, and then... "It's little Richard." A voice came, deep, and Jeongguk turned around in an instant, a chill running down his spine which startled him. "Quite impressive, innit?" continued, referring to the vinyl on the record player. Jeongguk's eyes were big for a few seconds, and it's like he forgot how to make speech with the vocal cords in his mouth. Talk. Jeongguk forgot how to talk. The man stood in front of him was tall, presumably not much taller than Jeongguk, but seemed a lot bigger, broader. Had golden hair falling on his face, slightly long, tufts of it creeping onto the back of his neck. He wore a bright red shirt and pants. "Well," the man spoke articulately, looking at Jeongguk, who still stood there, dumbfounded. "You lost or something." "No, sir," Jeongguk said, and sir? Why did he say sir? This man couldn't be much older than he was. Jeongguk cursed at his inner subconscious for letting that out. Dominant male authorities always scared him for reasons unknown. A little smirk fell onto the man's lips, and Jeongguk couldn't help but feel himself look at how the corner of his lips turned up at the slightest, and Jeongguk felt flustered. "I'll just head back to the living room now," Jeongguk let out, words muddling up a bit, and the man just nodded, the amused grin still on his face. Jeongguk turned his back and walked into the living room, wondering who he just saw and what he was doing in this house. Jeongguk's questions ate up his brain, and he looked and saw two women sitting on the couches, sat as if they were whispering something to one another. "Jeongguk," Rosie exclaimed, and her eyes lit up, but her voice was soft. That's what Jeongguk liked about her. She was always so soft-spoken. "You never said a proper hello to Veronica." Veronica, Jeongguk thought, and looked at the other woman on the couch. Curls of dark black hair fell till her chin, and she wore sharp red lipstick and some kind of glossy silver on her eyes. Intimidating. "Nice to meet you," Jeongguk smiled. "Nice to meet you too, Jeongguk," Veronica spoke, and Jeongguk saw her in contrast to his own sitting beside her. Rosie, with her long blonde hair and bright green eyes, cherry pink lips, and smaller frame. "I must apologize tremendously for not attending the wedding. I heard it was nice. Rosie, you must show me pictures." "There's plenty, and I told you to come. It was such a pleasant day, wasn't it, Jeongguk?" Rosie asked with a smile, and Jeongguk hummed, nodding. Rosie turned back to face Veronica. You must come with the two of us in the summer. We're going back to Yorkshire for a month to visit. I like London, I really do, but I already miss home, Rosie said, her shoulders falling ever so slightly. Jeongguk didn't find it in him to comfort her. London's nice. Do you work, Veronica? Jeongguk asked, and Veronica looked at him. How nice of you. So uncommon to hear men showing interest to the work of women, she chuckled, though her voice was dry, almost calculating, ironically flaring little interest. I'm a professor, I teach English, Veronica stated, and Jeongguk nodded. It was odd to feel so intimidated by a woman only a few years elder to him, but he felt a need to. Jeongguk's a lawyer, Rosie said with a gleam. Jeongguk chuckled out. Rosie, I'm not a lawyer. I go to law school. I'm finishing this year, but otherwise I'm a secretary at the Edwards Adams law firm, Jeongguk said, and Rosie let out a fond smile. Well, you're going to become a lawyer. A good one, too, Rosie said, and Jeongguk found a warm smile coming to his face. My husband's a lawyer, Veronica said, and Jeongguk looked at her. Perhaps he could help you out. That's when Rosie's eyes grew wide like saucers, as if forgetting something impotently vital. Your husband, where is he? Rosie let out, and it was rather endearing how excited she got over everything. Jeongguk's mind went back to the man he saw earlier in the foyer. The meeting felt false, as if it never occurred. Maybe it didn't, just Jeongguk's mind playing an illusion. That probably explained the indefinite glow around him. Oh, right, I completely forgot, Veronica chuckled, and it was almost captivating how mannish she came across, though looking young and prim. Taehyung, come here, would you? He's been awfully busy lately, some new case he's been working with. You know how hard it's been to get a job lately, so Taehyung's having to do the work of 10. Jeongguk sat down beside Rosie, who looked at him with a shy smile. Veronica got up for a fraction to go get her husband, Jeongguk assumes. I told you about her, remember? We were best friends when we were younger, but then she moved to London. She seems much older than you, Jeongguk pointed out. Oh, she is. Wouldn't want to reveal her age, but she's not too far from 30, Rosie chirped. Jeongguk himself was only 23 and Rosie 22. They were young, far too young to be alone in a big city like this with barely a job to cling onto. Jeongguk was studying law in King's College, while Rosie was studying botany in a women's college. Jeongguk suggested she pursue something more useful, like business or even English. But Rosie shrugged him off and told him that's a man's job, and she's happy with gardening. Jeongguk didn't fight that. The house in itself was terrifying. Jeongguk felt in the lap of luxury sitting on a plush velvet couch. Walls were dark wood and floors lapped with garnish. The curtains were thicker, and a well-lit fireplace lured Jeongguk's eyes to the side. It was no doubt Veronica and her husband, Taehyung, were rather rich. Old money, Jeongguk presumed, had to be. It's a nice house, isn't it? Rosie whispered, and Jeongguk hummed, looking at her. Better than our tiny flat, that's for sure. Jeongguk snickered, feeling his fingers coil up into his palm. Rosie laughed airily in agreement. Apologies, a voice entered, and Jeongguk lifted his head up to those vibrations that sent a familiar tingle down his spine. I've just been buried with work lately. A chuckle followed, and Jeongguk felt his fingers splay out on his thigh, a nervous instinct. It was the man with the red shirt and golden hair. Of course it was, Jeongguk thought. Why would it not be? Oh, of course, it was the man with the golden hair. Jeongguk's mouth went dry upon seeing him. Something about the way he smiled at Jeongguk with this unreadable gaze. Jeongguk hated that. Hated when he couldn't tell what someone was thinking. Except for this time, he didn't. It was rather alluring, actually. I'm Taehyung, he said, and then smiled at Rosie. Ah, Rosie, I remember you from your marriage ceremony. Oh, I was hopping you did. It's so nice to meet you, Rosie giggled, and it was almost embarrassing how bubbly she was. Jeongguk felt the need to be quiet around Taehyung. Felt the need to impress, the need to look proper. Taehyung just smiled at Rosie, who grabbed Jeongguk's hand in a haste. This is Jeongguk. We got married this summer, actually, Rosie said excitedly, and Jeongguk looked up at the man. Taehyung looked at Jeongguk, and they held their stare for a few seconds, and Taehyung nodded, smiling softly. Nice to meet you, Taehyung said, voice almost cautiously tender. You too, Jeongguk replied quickly, and then internally cursed at himself for sounding as far off as he did. Ah, you've made acquaintances. You know, it'd be really nice if the two of you bonded a little. Rosie's moved into town now, you can guarantee I'll be going out more. Veronica laughed, and Rosie looked at Veronica, cheeks tinting in confusion. I won't be going out much. Oh, Rosie, I'm joking. They're only men, they'll understand. Now come help with dinner, let's leave the men to chat. Veronica said, and Rosie nodded triumphantly and followed behind Veronica. Jeongguk looked and wondered if Rosie was trying to impress Veronica too, maybe, at a subconscious level. So, heard you're going to law school. I am. I'm going to graduate in a year. I work at Edwards Adams now, Jeongguk explained. Taehyung snickered. Jeongguk was confused at that. Edwards Adams? That's opposite the street from my firm, what do you do? Jeongguk hated when men asked that. I'm a secretary to Mr. Edwards himself, Jeongguk mumbled, and then waited for that silent seconds of judgment and mockery before the outright outburst of hypermasculine confusion over why a man would take the job designed for women. Jeongguk looked up. Taehyung wasn't laughing. He was smiling. That's nice. Quite respectable, considering how young you probably are, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk finally smiled a little. Oh, why yes, thank you. Most find it rather amusing, Jeongguk said, finding himself playing with his trousers. It's not amusing at all. You've got the hardest job there is. I mean, what is it you have to do? Get coffee 8 times, and then repeat and repeat. And Jeongguk burst out laughing, and then looked through his hooded vision to see Taehyung smiling. You wouldn't imagine the number of times Mr. Edwards has asked for coffee, and I've just given him tea or juice or water or an empty cup, Jeongguk said. And this time, Taehyung burst out laughing. Mr. Edwards, good old guy, doesn't like a day over 98. Both laughed until Jeongguk was holding onto his sides in hopes to not start crying from how overwhelming the jabs of laughter were. Taehyung laughed too, and then it simmered down and he looked at Jeongguk, smiling. Wine. Yes, please. Both got up and Jeongguk followed Taehyung to the room off to the side of the kitchen, a little room which was cooler and full of wine bottles. That's how you know someone's rich, when they have a tiny room designated for alcohol consumption. It was a giant wooden wall with holes in it, all holding bottles of wine. Jeongguk chuckled. Avid drinker. Does 3 times a day count? Taehyung asked, looking at a bottle precisely, and then taking the bottle out of the wooden cabinet it was snuggled in. Taehyung looked at it and then looked at Jeongguk. Shaitao Lafate? You could give me anything, frankly, I don't know much about wine. Jeongguk said, and Taehyung chuckled. You seem like a rum guy. Taehyung hummed to himself as they walked out of the room and towards the table where 2 glasses were set. More of a cocktail man myself, Jeongguk said, and Taehyung scoffed. That's a womanly drink, Taehyung said, setting the bottle onto the table. Let me pour you something real men drink. If the French made it, it's far from manly. Jeongguk scoffed back and Taehyung laughed. Taehyung poured only a little into both glasses, and then Jeongguk looked at him. Saw how his blonde hair was thick, almost a mullet if he squinted. Fascinating, Jeongguk thought, and controlled himself from carding a strand through his fingers. Here, Taehyung said abruptly, turning around and handing Jeongguk the glass. Jeongguk was close to him, must have not realized how close he was, because Jeongguk reached to grab the glass, but it knocked against Taehyung's chest, and a splash of wine splurged onto Taehyung's shirt. Oh, Jeongguk said, eyes wide. That shirt must have costed more than he did. I'm so sorry, it's fine. No, I didn't realize it, just it was so sudden, and Taehyung chuckled. Calm down, Chipper, it's no big deal. It's just a little stain. Hand me a napkin, will ya? Taehyung said softly, and Jeongguk felt something stir within him at how calm Taehyung was acting. Jeongguk nodded at his words and reached for the napkin on the table and then turned around to look at Taehyung. Jeongguk hesitated for a split second and then reached forward and pressed the napkin against Taehyung's chest. Sorry, Jeongguk said. Taehyung, a little confused by Jeongguk's action, let his arm stay by his side. Don't worry about it. Jeongguk continued, dabbing the napkin lightly against the stain of red wine seeping through his chest. Jeongguk gulped and then realized how close they were. He looked up. A rather stupid decision, he'd later realize, but he didn't at the time, and he saw how Taehyung looked down at him with his deep auburn eyes. Jeongguk felt this hitch rise in his throat, and goddammit, he's a lawyer. Isn't meant to freeze up like this, isn't meant to be lost for words, lost for thoughts. Taehyung's eyes didn't move an inch, stayed boring into Jeongguk's warmer brown ones until Jeongguk applied a little too much pressure onto the napkin he was patting against Taehyung's chest. Out, Taehyung let out and then put his fingers over Jeongguk's. Are you all right? Yes, Jeongguk said, moving his hand. I'm perfectly fine. Why would I not be? Are you fine? Jeongguk stammered, and Taehyung looked amused. He stayed silent, which was killing, and Taehyung knew this. Of course he did. Otherwise, he'd speak up. But no, he remained quiet and let Jeongguk burrow himself in the hole he'd dug himself into. I mean your shirt. Is your shirt fine? Jeongguk added, and God, how horrible thoughts were, and how horrible those instincts that put forth them without a filter. How absolutely, redundantly horrible. Taehyung must have seen the cringe on Jeongguk's face, for he laughed. Yes, my shirt seems well. Jeongguk felt his cheeks deep in red, probably matching the shade of Taehyung's shirt. He grabbed the glass of wine and lifted it to his lips, letting the velvety taste slither down his tongue until he felt a hand on his waist and almost spat it out. Have you never had wine before? Taehyung asked, looking delightfully aghast to see Jeongguk swallow down wine like it's a tall glass of lemonade on a summer day. Of course I've had wine before, Jeongguk said, putting his glass down, humiliated to be asked if he's ever had wine before. But I'm also 23 years of age. I drink wine as regularly as you drink cola. And I assume you drink a lot of that, Taehyung said and then sighed. I might have just met you, but I can tell you know nothing of sophistication. Oh, and you do, Jeongguk teased, and Taehyung smirked a little, leaning in to speak quieter, Jeongguk presumes. Have you seen my home, Mr. Jeon? Jeongguk looked at him and saw how his features were so defined, sharp, jaw slant and nose high, cheekbones sculpted and eyebrows dark. If Jeongguk had another glass of wine or two, he'd probably think Taehyung looked perfect. He definitely wasn't thinking that right now, while silently looking at him. No way. Quite the aristocrat, are you? Jeongguk whispered, and then felt the front his shoe get nudged by another and realized how close they were standing for their shoes to be aligned. Head to head, practically. The symmetry was almost deranging, the irony of it. I can be, Taehyung replied, and Jeongguk saw Taehyung step back, and the negative space that surrounded where Jeongguk stood, which wasn't filled by Taehyung, was irritating. Jeongguk didn't know why. You probably own a boat. We call them yachts. You probably own a yacht. 2, actually. You own 2 yachts? Well, one in a sailboat, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk saw him pour wine into his own glass and then look at Jeongguk and point. We should go sailing sometime. Already making plans together, I see. A downy voice broke Jeongguk's avid imagination, which was envisioning him and Taehyung sailing together. Jeongguk looked and saw Veronica, and Rosie stood beside her, both holding trays of food in their hand, which they walked over to place on the wooden table on the side. Taehyung chuckled. I've decided to take Jeongguk under my wing, teach him a thing or two about the creme de la creme. After all, he will be working around lawyers. Jeongguk blinked, focusing a little too much on how his name sounded rolling off Taehyung's tongue. Like beautiful, it sounded beautiful. There are only a few things in life that are beautiful. Starry Nights, Love Me Tender by Elvis, and the way Taehyung said Jeongguk's name. Also Rosie on their wedding day, in no particular order. I love that, Rosie chirped, smiling big. You two could become friends like us, Rosie said, getting excited over her own idea. Taehyung doesn't have friends, Rosie. He's too busy with work. Aren't you, love? Veronica said, walking up to him, heels clicking against the wooden flooring. Taehyung put his hands on her waist. Love bringing that up, don't you? Taehyung said, and then kissed her cheek delicately. He then looked at Jeongguk and Rosie, while Veronica placed a hand on Taehyung's chest, smirking, reminding Jeongguk of Taehyung in a way. Their likeness was almost fascinatingly disorienting. Fascinating how they complemented one another, disorienting how Taehyung kissed her. Jeongguk thought it looked slightly off. Probably just him, though. Oh, you've spilled wine on your shirt. Could you not be incompetent for one night? We have guests over. Veronica said in that posh voice which told Jeongguk she was from a high-class background without her having to say it. It wasn't me, darling, Taehyung said, and then looked at Jeongguk, smiling softly. Jeongguk spilled it on me. I'm sorry. It was sudden. Jeongguk said, and Rosie laughed fondly. Well then, I can't yell at you yet, not until I know you well enough, Veronica said, and Taehyung chuckled. I'll yell at him for you. Would you like that, Jeongguk? Taehyung asked, the corner of his lip turning up. Jeongguk paused. What was that supposed to mean? But he just laughed. He's sure it sounded as forced as it felt. We should probably eat dinner before it gets too late. We've both got classes tomorrow, Rosie said, and Veronica cooed. It's cute how young you are. Reminiscing, I miss it, don't you? Veronica said, setting up the dinner on the table. She always sounded so blunt and condescending. Jeongguk couldn't tell when she was being sarcastic and when she wasn't. I don't. Apparently, if you're 23 now, you drink cola, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk laughed airily. The sound caught Taehyung's ear, must have, for he turned his head towards Jeongguk and smiled. Jeongguk looked at him and looked away, not knowing why he did. But he did. And Taehyung did too. It went on for the rest of the night, both locking eyes and then looking away. Dinner went smoothly, the women mainly talking about who knows what, while Taehyung and Jeongguk supplied their own comments every now and then. It was strange to see, but Veronica almost exuded this nature of strong-headedness that Jeongguk didn't see much in women. Perhaps it explained how silent Taehyung was and the lack thereof when he was with Jeongguk. This was so nice, Veronica. Thank you. I missed you so when you went off to London, Rosie said, fast, her fingers jittery. The contrast between her and Veronica was more than articulate. Veronica was put together, self-assured, strong-minded, clearly highly intelligent, and didn't seem to be looking for Taehyung's approval every other second. While Rosie was the exact opposite. Jeongguk wonders if Rosie'll become the same after a few more years of marriage. Don't worry about it, Rosie. You live not too far from here now. Come over whenever you please. I hope to meet you two more often, Veronica said, smiling genuinely. Yes, please. All these 30-something lawyers and doctors are a bore after a couple of dinner parties. There's only so much you can discuss when you spend your days staring at piles of paper and bones, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk began giggling. The giggling almost immediately stopped when Veronica looked at him. She looked at him for a few seconds and then smiled. You and Taehyung seem to get along well. Do spend time around him. I don't want him to become boring, Veronica said, and Taehyung scoffed. You sound like a mother, Ronnie. That said, I wouldn't mind, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk just looked at Taehyung and gave a nod. They got up and headed for the door, the goodbye lasting longer as the women kept talking about something they didn't on the dinner table. It's exhausting how much they have to talk about. Jeongguk wishes they'd keep some of it bottled up for the next time they meet. So, Taehyung said, looking at Jeongguk. Am I going to be seeing more of you? Taehyung asked, but he didn't. It was more of a statement. A rhetorical question, if you will, for he already seemed so sure of the answer. If you want to, Jeongguk responded, and Taehyung chuckled. That's not a real answer. If you want to is what people say when they don't want to. Really, Jeongguk, I couldn't help notice how choked up you get sometimes, Taehyung said, and then placed his hand on Jeongguk's arm. Relax. Do some yoga maybe. Works for the Indians. Jeongguk felt this flush of warmth flood over his face when Taehyung touched him and some kind of electricity buzz up his spine. He didn't know why or what or how. All he knew is he'd like it if Taehyung touched him a little more. Yoga, right? Jeongguk chuckled and then looked at Taehyung. He hesitated for a few seconds and then nodded. Yes. You will be seeing more of me, Jeongguk said, and then felt himself grow timid at how Taehyung's grin widened. If you want to. I do, Taehyung said, and Jeongguk smiled. Jeongguk later walked down the street from Taehyung's house to his own, walking alongside Rosie, who complained about how cold it was. Jeongguk barely listened. Couldn't get Taehyung's smile out of his head. Did you like them? Rosie asked when they reached their shabby little home, taking her coat off. Jeongguk took his off too, placing it on the coat hanger and walking down the floorboards and into the kitchen. Yeah, Veronica seems nice. Rather intelligent, it's charming, Jeongguk said, and Rosie walked up to him. And what about Taehyung? Rosie asked, and Jeongguk felt a tinge twist his gut at his name and took out a jug of water and poured a glass for himself. He's nice. Quite funny, don't know why you told me Veronica's husband would be boring, Jeongguk said. Well, that's what Veronica told me, but he seems sweet and so very handsome, Rosie hummed. Jeongguk smiled to himself, so very handsome. I'm going to change for the night, Rosie said, leaning up to kiss Jeongguk's cheek. Come to bed soon, don't stay up reading again. Don't stay up waiting again, you're mean sometimes. Rosie pouted and Jeongguk looked at her and then felt his shoulders tensed, so he relaxed them. Didn't know why they got so tense. He leaned down. Love you, Jeongguk whispered and kissed her gently. She smiled, kissed him back, then pulled away. Love you too, she said softly, and Jeongguk smiled and then saw her turn around and walk away, a small skip in her step, her hair bouncing as she did. And as Jeongguk looked, he felt his mind blur. He couldn't stop thinking about Taehyung.